I used to think I had it all. A beautiful wife, 2 wonderful daughters, and a life that, while not perfect, was something I was proud of. My wife, Jessica, and I had been married for 15 years, and we had built a life together, one filled with love, trust, and years of shared memories. Or so I thought. Looking back now, I can see the cracks that had been forming long before I noticed them. Maybe I was too wrapped up in work, too caught up in the comfort of routine to see what was happening right in front of me. But when you've been with someone for so long, you don't question the little things. It started subtly. Jessica began dressing differently, not just for special occasions, but for work, for errands, even just to step out of the house. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe she just wanted to feel good about herself. Then came the late nights. She started working extra shifts, coming home long after the kids had gone to bed. I joked about it at first, even teased her about being a workaholic. But her responses were always vague, brushed off excuses, quick kisses, and a tired smile before disappearing into the shower. And then there was the phone. Jessica had always been glued to her phone, but suddenly, she became secretive about it. It was always face down. If I walked into the room while she was texting, she'd tuck it away. And when I jokingly reached for it once, she snatched it back with a sharp, "That's private." Private? Since when did we have secrets? But the worst part wasn't her behavior. It was my daughters. Olivia and Hannah, my 2 little girls, started acting differently toward me. Olivia, my oldest, barely spoke to me unless it was necessary. Hannah, my baby girl, who used to greet me at the door with a hug, had become distant. I didn't understand what was happening. I told myself it was all in my head. That I was overthinking things. That Jessica would never betray me. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. Denial is a funny thing. It lets you lie to yourself even when the truth is staring you in the face. For weeks, I told myself I was imagining things. That Jessica's late nights were real work shifts, that her new wardrobe was just a phase, that my daughter's coldness toward me was just teenage attitude. But deep down, I knew better. The night before my birthday, she came home late again. I had stayed up, pretending to watch TV, but really, I was waiting for her. When she finally walked through the door at almost midnight, I knew something was off. Her hair was slightly messy. Her makeup, she still had it on, something she never did after a long shift at the hospital. Her perfume was stronger than usual, like she had just reapplied it. And most importantly, she barely looked at me. "Long night?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She nodded, tossing her purse onto the table and heading straight toward the bathroom. "Yeah. I need a shower." That was the first time I felt the real weight of suspicion settle in my chest. Jessica had always been the type to kick off her shoes, sigh dramatically about how exhausted she was, and collapse on the couch for a few minutes before dragging herself to bed. But that night, she went straight for the shower, like she needed to wash something away. I sat there, staring at the closed bathroom door, listening to the water run. My gut twisted. I wanted to believe she was just tired. That I was overreacting. But then I noticed her phone, left unattended on the kitchen counter. That never happened. Jessica's phone was practically glued to her hand lately. And now, it was just, sitting there. I hesitated for a moment, then stood up, my heart hammering. I wasn't the type to invade her privacy, but something in me needed to know. My hands felt clammy as I reached for the phone. Locked. Of course. But here's the thing, her passcode had always been our anniversary. It was one of those little things couples do, a sign of trust. So, without thinking, I typed it in. Wrong passcode. Try again. I stared at the screen, my stomach sinking. She changed it. I put the phone down as fast as I picked it up, stepping back like it had burned me. The shower was still running. I could hear her humming softly, like everything was normal. Like she wasn't hiding something. I sat back down, rubbing my hands over my face. My mind was racing. There were only two reasons she would change her passcode. 1, she was planning a surprise for me, unlikely, since she'd barely acknowledged my birthday was the next day. Or 2, she was hiding something. And deep down, I already knew which one it was. Still, I didn't say anything that night. Instead, I went to bed beside my wife, pretending I didn't feel like a stranger in my own home. But I had made up my mind. Tomorrow, I was going to find out the truth. I woke up on my birthday feeling like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to crumble beneath him. Jessica barely acknowledged me that morning. A quick, distracted, happy birthday, as she rushed to get ready for work, no kiss, no real warmth. There was no mention of plans, no surprise, nothing. After 15 years together, I didn't expect grand gestures, but I at least expected something. I didn't push it. I was too focused on what I had planned. That night, she had another late shift. I let her go without a word, acting like I believed every excuse, every lie. But this time, I wasn't just going to sit at home wondering. This time, I was going to follow her. I waited 10 minutes after she left before grabbing my keys and heading out. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't know what I was hoping for. That she'd actually be at work. That I was wrong. Or that I'd finally get the proof I needed. I stayed a few cars behind her, careful not to get too close. My heart pounded harder with every turn she made. But she wasn't heading toward the hospital. She was heading to the other side of town. 20 minutes later, she pulled into the parking lot of a dimly lit bar. My stomach twisted. I parked a few spaces away, my pulse hammering in my ears as I watched her get out of the car. Then, he appeared. A tall, young guy, too young, was standing outside waiting. He had that cocky grin, the kind of confidence that came with youth, like he had the world figured out. And then it happened. Jessica walked straight into his arms. And she kissed him. The world around me blurred. My body went numb. It felt like time had slowed down, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart, not my own. I wanted to get out of the car, to storm over there and demand answers, to make a scene, to scream at her, at him, at the universe for turning my life into a fucking nightmare. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking, and started taking pictures. I don't even know why I did it. Maybe I needed the proof. Maybe I needed something to hold on to so I couldn't gaslight myself into thinking I was wrong. But as I sat there, staring at my wife in the arms of another man, something inside me broke. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. She had made her choice. And now, I was going to make mine. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so hard they ached. My breath came out in uneven bursts, my chest rising and falling as I stared at the undeniable truth playing out in front of me. Jessica wasn't hesitating. She wasn't looking around nervously, afraid of being caught. No. She was laughing. Smiling up at him like he was the best thing to ever happen to her. She touched his arm, leaned into him, let him pull her close like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she wasn't a married woman. Like she wasn't my wife. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and forced myself to keep watching. As much as it burned, I needed this. I needed to see her for who she really was, not the person I had convinced myself she still might be. They walked into the bar together. I clenched my jaw, debating whether I should follow. Bust in, make a scene, let the whole world know what kind of woman she really was. I could already picture it, the music cutting out, heads turning as I threw down the pictures in front of her and demanded answers. But I didn't. Instead, I exhaled slowly and started my car. I wasn't about to let her control the narrative. If I confronted her here, she'd cry, make excuses, spin some bullshit about how it wasn't what it looked like. No. I needed to do this on my terms. I drove home in a haze, my thoughts racing faster than the car. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were shaking so bad I had to grip my knees just to steady myself. I sat in the dark for a while, staring at the house we had built together. Every brick, every window, every flower in the front yard, it all felt like a lie now. A carefully curated illusion of a happy family. I stepped inside, the house eerily silent. The girls were asleep. If only they knew what their mother was really doing. For the first time since this nightmare started, I let myself feel everything. The betrayal. The anger. The absolute rage burning in my chest. I wanted to break something, to punch a hole in the wall, to scream until my throat was raw. But I didn't. Instead, I grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the cabinet, poured myself a glass, and sat at the kitchen table. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the pictures I had taken earlier. Each one stabbed deeper than the last. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. Jessica had chosen this guy over her family. Over me. Over everything we had built. And the worst part? She had been doing it right under my nose. I took a slow sip, letting the burn of the alcohol distract me from the pain clawing at my chest. By the time I finished the glass, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to end this. On my terms. And when Jessica walked through that door, she had no idea that her entire world was about to collapse. Jessica walked in around 2 a.m. I heard the quiet click of the front door, the soft rustling of her coat as she took it off, the careful footsteps as she tried not to wake anyone. She had no idea I was waiting. I sat at the kitchen table, an empty whiskey glass in front of me, my phone resting on the table with the pictures open. I didn't bother turning on the main light, just the dim glow from the stove illuminated the room. She turned the corner and froze the moment she saw me. "Oh," she said, blinking in surprise. "You're still up?" I studied her. Her hair was slightly tousled. Her lipstick was smudged. The faintest hint of cologne, not mine, clung to her clothes. She didn't even look guilty. I gestured toward the chair across from me. "Sit." She hesitated. "Bill, it's late. Can we talk in the morning?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "No. We're doing this now." Something in my tone must have warned her that this wasn't just another late-night conversation. Slowly, she walked over and sat down, crossing her arms over her chest. I picked up my phone, turned it around, and slid it across the table. Her eyes flickered down to the screen, and in an instant, I saw it, the panic. She stared at the pictures. The ones of her and her boy toy wrapped up in each other, completely oblivious to the world around them. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I leaned back, arms crossed. "So. Do you want to start with a lie, or do you want to tell me the truth for once?" Jessica swallowed, her throat bobbing. "Bill, I don't." My voice was calm. Too calm. "I don't want to hear excuses. I don't want to hear, 'It's not what it looks like,' because I know exactly what it is." She looked down, her hands tightening into fists. "It was a mistake," she whispered. I slammed my fist on the table, making her jump. "A mistake?" I growled. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up the dry cleaning. A mistake is burning dinner. You don't accidentally fall into another man's bed, Jessica." Tears welled up in her eyes. I never meant for it to happen." I scoffed. "Right. You just happened to dress up, sneak around, change your passcode, and lie straight to my face. Is that what you're telling me?" She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. I didn't want to hurt you. I stared at her, numb. Well, you did. Silence stretched between us. Finally, I exhaled. I'm filing for divorce. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. Bill, please. No, I cut her off. I'm done, Jessica. I'll talk to a lawyer tomorrow. We'll figure out custody, the house, all of it. She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. It was just one time, Bill. I swear. Can't we work through this? I let out a slow breath and stood up. I followed you, Jessica. I saw the way you kissed him. I saw how comfortable you were. That wasn't one time. That was familiar. She looked down at the table, knowing she had no way out. I walked to the doorway, pausing for a second. You already made your choice. Now I'm making mine. And with that, I walked away, leaving her sitting there in silence. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt free. The next morning, the house felt different. Empty. Even though Jessica was still there, moving around the kitchen in silence, it was like we were living in two separate worlds. I barely looked at her as I poured my coffee. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of her stare, the desperate tension in the air. She was waiting for me to say something, to take back my words from last night. But I wasn't going to. She finally broke the silence. Are you really going to do this? Her voice was hoarse, raw from crying. I sipped my coffee, then set the mug down with a quiet clink. I already told you, Jessica. I called a lawyer this morning. Her breath hitched, and for the first time, she looked afraid. Bill, please. Just talk to me. I laughed, actually laughed, but there was nothing warm about it. Now you want to talk. After months of lying, sneaking around, and gaslighting me, now you care. She flinched like I had slapped her. I do care. Bullshit. I grabbed my keys from the counter. If you cared, we wouldn't be here. She stepped closer, reaching for my arm. Bill, we have a life together. A family. What about the girls? I paused at the door, my shoulders stiff. Yeah. What about them? She swallowed hard. Are you going to tell them? I turned to face her, and for the first time since I caught her, I saw real fear in her eyes. She knew. She knew that once Olivia and Hannah found out the truth, she wouldn't be able to control the narrative. I'm not lying for you, I said coldly. If they ask, I'll tell them exactly why this family is falling apart. Jessica's breath hitched, and for the first time, her sadness shifted into something else, panic. She was losing control. Bill, please, she begged. Let's go to counseling. We can fix this. I shook my head. There's nothing left to fix. I turned and walked out, leaving her standing there, alone in the kitchen, the same way she had left me alone in this marriage long before I even realized it. Later that day, I got a text from Olivia. Mom said you're mad at her but won't tell us why. What's going on? I stared at the message for a long time. This was it, the moment of truth. I took a deep breath and started typing. I think we need to talk. Meet me at the diner after school. I wasn't going to let Jessica twist this. My daughters deserve to hear the truth, from me. I sat at the diner, staring at the half-empty cup of coffee in front of me, my thoughts a tangled mess. I knew this conversation wasn't going to be easy. No matter how much I prepared myself, nothing could change the fact that I was about to tell our daughters that their mother had betrayed me, that she was the reason our family was falling apart. A part of me still hoped, stupidly, that Olivia and Hannah would understand. That they would see through their mother's lies. But I had a sinking feeling that Jessica had already gotten to them. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see Olivia and Hannah walking in. Olivia, my 16-year-old, led the way, her expression guarded. Hannah, 13, followed close behind, her eyes darting around like she didn't want to be here. They slid into the booth across from me. I forced a small smile. Thanks for coming. Olivia crossed her arms. Mom said you're leaving her. I let out a slow breath, rubbing my temple. Of course, Jessica would phrase it like that. I'm divorcing your mother, I said carefully. Because she cheated on me. The words landed like a bomb. Hannah's eyes widened, but Olivia barely reacted. Instead, she narrowed her eyes at me. She told us it was a mistake, she said. That you're overreacting. I clenched my jaw. A mistake is forgetting to pick up groceries. Cheating is a choice. Hannah swallowed hard. So, it's true, she whispered. I nodded. I caught her. I saw her with him. Olivia rolled her eyes. And what? You're just gonna throw everything away? You've been married for 15 years, Dad. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I stared at her, barely believing what I was hearing. She threw everything away, Olivia, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Not me. She let out a sharp breath and shook her head. You're being so dramatic. People make mistakes. She said it didn't even mean anything. I felt something inside me snap. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and set it on the table. The pictures, the proof, were already on the screen. Look at it, I said. Hannah hesitated, but Olivia snatched the phone up. Her expression remained blank as she scrolled, but her grip on the phone tightened. When she finally looked up, her face was red with anger, but not at Jessica. At me. Why would you show us this? She demanded. Do you want us to hate her? I stared at her in disbelief. You think I want this? I asked, my voice low. I don't want you to hate her, Olivia. But I'm not going to lie to you, either. She did this. She made this choice. Hannah looked between us, clearly torn. But, you and Mom can still fix it, right? No, I said firmly. This isn't something you fix. Olivia shoved my phone back at me. You just want to be a victim, she snapped. You're being selfish. You don't care about our family at all. That one hurt. I took a slow breath, gripping my hands together to keep myself steady. I care about this family more than anything, I said. That's why I'm not going to stay in a marriage built on lies. Olivia shook her head. I can't believe you. She stood up abruptly, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Come on, Hannah. Hannah hesitated, biting her lip. For a second, I thought she might stay. But then she followed her sister. And just like that, I watched my daughters walk out of the diner, choosing their mother over me. I sat there for a long time, staring at the table, feeling the crushing weight of it all. Jessica had won. At least, for now. I sat in that diner for what felt like hours after Olivia and Hannah left. My coffee had gone cold, my appetite completely gone. I had expected anger. I had expected confusion. But what I didn't expect, what I wasn't prepared for, was how quickly they turned against me. Jessica had them wrapped around her finger. I should have seen it coming. She had weeks to get in their heads, to paint herself as the remorseful mother who made a tiny mistake, and me as the cold-hearted father who was tearing the family apart. And it worked. I finally forced myself to leave the diner, though my legs felt heavy, my body weighed down by everything that had just happened. The drive home was a blur. When I pulled into the driveway, Jessica's car was there. Of course. I walked in to find her sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea like she was in mourning. When she looked up and saw me, her expression was unreadable. How did it go? She asked softly, like she actually cared. I set my keys on the counter with a loud clank and exhaled slowly. You got to them first, didn't you? Jessica's brows furrowed. I didn't get to them, Bill. I just told them the truth. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. No, you told them your version of the truth. Let me guess, you told them it was a mistake, that I was being unreasonable, that I'm trying to destroy this family. She opened her mouth, hesitated, then closed it again. I shook my head. Unbelievable. Jessica sighed and leaned forward. Bill, they need their mother. They need stability. If you go through with this divorce, you're going to break them. I let out a slow, deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. No, you broke them when you decided some 21-year-old was worth more than your family. She winced. I never meant to hurt you. Stop saying that, I snapped. You did hurt me. And now you're trying to turn our daughters against me so you don't have to face the consequences of what you did. Jessica's eyes welled with tears, but I didn't feel sorry for her. She wasn't the victim. Bill, she whispered, can't we just? No, I cut her off. We can't. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and pulled up a number I had already saved earlier that day. Who are you calling? She asked warily. My lawyer, I said simply. Her face paled. Bill, please. Don't do this. The girls. They'll see the truth eventually, I said, my voice flat. And when they do, I'll be right here. Waiting. I pressed the call button and walked out of the room, ignoring the quiet sobs I heard behind me. This was happening. For better or worse, I was done. Days passed, then weeks. The tension in the house was unbearable. Every interaction with Jessica was laced with underlying hostility, and my daughters barely spoke to me unless they had to. I wasn't dad anymore. I was the bad guy in their eyes, the one breaking up our family, the one who wouldn't forgive their mother. I kept telling myself they'd understand one day. That they'd realize I wasn't the villain. But then Father's Day happened. I woke up that morning expecting. I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe just an awkward, forced greeting from Olivia and Hannah. Instead, I woke up to an empty house. The silence was deafening. No giggles from the kitchen, no breakfast smells filling the air. Just me, alone in a house that used to be filled with life. I checked my phone, nothing. No messages. No missed calls. I frowned, walking downstairs, expecting to find Jessica and the girls still asleep. Maybe they were just having a lazy morning. But then I saw the note. Spending the day at the beach with Mom. Be back later. Olivia and Hannah. My stomach dropped. The beach? On Father's Day? Without even telling me. I sat down hard in one of the kitchen chairs, my mind racing. I knew Jessica had planned this. I knew she had orchestrated the whole thing, convincing them it was just a fun day out without thinking about me. Without thinking about how much today would have meant to me. I gripped my phone tightly, anger simmering beneath my skin. Maybe I should have let it go. Maybe I should have just waited until they got home and calmly talked to them. But then my phone buzzed. A message from my mother-in-law. Hope you're having fun at the beach with the girls. The pictures Jessica posted look amazing. I froze. I clicked the link. And there it was. Jessica had posted smiling, happy pictures of her and the girls at the beach, laughing, splashing in the waves, playing in the sand. Like it was a perfect family day. Like I didn't exist. Like I was already erased. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. This wasn't just an oversight. This was deliberate. She wanted to make sure I knew my place. That I was being pushed out of their lives. I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart pounding. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, tempted to reply, to comment, to say something. But I didn't. Instead, I did something else. I called my lawyer. And I told him to file for full custody. Jessica wanted a war. She just got one. Filing for full custody wasn't a decision I made lightly. I knew the battle ahead wouldn't be easy, courts favor mothers, and Jessica had already poisoned the well with Olivia and Hannah. But after Father's Day, after she erased me from my own family's life, I knew I had no choice. I wasn't going to let her push me out. The next morning, I sat across from my lawyer, Mark Reynolds, a no-nonsense, sharp-eyed man who had seen it all before. He flipped through the paperwork in front of him, nodding slowly as I laid everything out, the affair, the manipulation, the way Jessica had turned my daughters against me. "I won't lie to you," he said finally, setting his pen down. "This is going to be a fight. She's their mother, and unless you can prove she's unfit, getting full custody will be difficult." I exhaled, rubbing my hands over my face. I'm not trying to take them away from her. I just want a fair shot. Right now, she's making sure they see me as the enemy. Mark nodded. "We'll argue for joint custody, but if she fights back, it could get ugly." I leaned forward. "Then let's get ugly." Jessica found out 2 days later. She stormed into the house, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. "You're suing me for full custody," she shrieked, eyes blazing with fury. I stayed seated on the couch, calm, collected, the exact opposite of her. "I'm doing what's best for my daughters," I said evenly. She let out a bitter laugh. "Best for them? You're trying to take them away from their mother." I met her gaze without blinking. "No, Jessica. I'm trying to make sure they have a father who isn't erased from their lives." Her jaw clenched, her hands curling into fists. "You're doing this because you're angry. You don't actually care about their well-being." I stood up, closing the distance between us. "You took them to the beach on Father's Day and didn't even tell me," I said, my voice dangerously low. "You posted pictures like I never existed. You've been feeding them lies about what really happened. And I'm the one who doesn't care." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, she had no excuse. A beat of silence passed before she finally scoffed. "They're not going to choose you." I let that sit in the air for a moment. Then, I smiled. "We'll see." That night, I got a text from Olivia. "Mom said you're trying to take us away from her." "What the hell, Dad?" I exhaled sharply, staring at the screen. She was already spinning the story. I started typing. "I'm not taking you away from her. I'm making sure I get to be your dad. The way things are now, I barely exist in your life." A minute passed. Then another. Then, finally, 3 little dots appeared. "I just don't get why you have to make this so messy. Mom said you could have worked things out if you really wanted to." I clenched my jaw. Jessica was still lying to them. I swallowed the lump in my throat and responded. "I wanted to. But she's the one who destroyed this family, not me. One day, you'll see the truth." I stared at the message for a long time after I sent it. No response. Nothing. Just silence. Jessica was right about one thing, this wasn't going to be easy. But I wasn't giving up. The silence from Olivia lasted for days. No texts, no calls, not even a glance in my direction when she walked past me in the house. Hannah wasn't much better. It was like living with 2 ghosts, my own daughters, yet completely out of reach. Jessica had done her job well. But I wasn't going to roll over and let her rewrite history. If she wanted a fight, she was getting one. The first court hearing came sooner than expected. We weren't at the custody battle stage yet, this was just a preliminary hearing to establish living arrangements and financial responsibilities. Jessica sat across from me in the courtroom, her posture flawless, her expression calm, like she had rehearsed every word she was going to say. Her lawyer, a sharp-looking man in a gray suit, stood first. "Your Honor, My client is more than willing to share custody, but she has concerns about Bill's emotional stability. Given his aggressive reaction to the situation, we believe joint custody should be reconsidered. I almost laughed. Aggressive reaction? My lawyer, Mark, stood up immediately. Your Honor, my client discovered his wife was cheating on him with a much younger man, then found out she had been manipulating their daughters against him. If anything, Mr. Dawson has shown incredible restraint. Jessica's lawyer smiled like he expected that response. Regardless, the children have clearly expressed a preference to stay with their mother, and we believe disrupting their current routine would be harmful. There it was. The same bullshit excuse courts always favored. The kids should stay with their mom argument. I clenched my jaw as Mark pushed back. Your Honor, that's because their mother has deliberately turned them against my client. We request a formal evaluation to assess whether they have been unduly influenced. The judge frowned, considering it. That was a risky move. Psychological evaluations took time and could go either way. But if I didn't push back, Jessica would continue feeding our daughters lies without any consequences. Jessica finally spoke, her voice soft and trembling, a performance she had perfected over the years. Bill, I don't want to fight like this. I just want what's best for Olivia and Hannah. I leaned forward, lowering my voice so only she could hear me. Then stop lying to them. Her face twitched, just slightly, before she turned back to the judge with an innocent expression. I hated her in that moment. In the end, the judge ruled that temporary joint custody would remain in place until further evaluation. I wasn't winning yet, but I hadn't lost either. Jessica shot me a look on our way out of the courtroom. You're just making this harder for them, she whispered. I stared back at her. You already did that. That night, Olivia finally spoke to me. I was sitting at the kitchen table when she marched in, dropping her backpack on the counter. Why are you doing this? She snapped. I set my pen down, keeping my tone even. Doing what? She threw her arms up. Dragging us through court like this. You're making everything worse. I took a slow breath, trying to stay calm. Olivia, I'm not dragging you through anything. I'm making sure I still get to be your father. You already are, she shot back. But Mom says. I held up a hand. Stop right there. She hesitated. I met her eyes. I love your mother. I always have. But she is lying to you. Her jaw clenched. No, she's not. I reached for my phone, pulled up the pictures of Jessica and her affair partner outside the bar, and slid it across the table. Then look at this. She hesitated. I saw the war in her eyes, the part of her that wanted to keep believing her mother wouldn't do this, versus the part that was terrified I was telling the truth. She grabbed the phone, scrolled through the pictures, and for the first time, I saw real doubt in her expression. She said it was just once, she whispered. I leaned forward. It wasn't. She set the phone down, blinking rapidly, like she was struggling to process it. Finally, she looked at me. Even if she lied, she said quietly, she's still my mom. I nodded. I know. She swallowed hard. I don't want to talk about this anymore. And just like that, she was gone. But something had shifted. She wasn't defending Jessica anymore. She was questioning her. And that was the first step. Jessica had spent weeks turning them against me. But now, for the first time, I had cracked the foundation of her lies. And I wasn't stopping until my daughters knew the whole truth. The day after Olivia saw the pictures, something changed in the house. She wasn't as cold toward me. She wasn't warm either, but she wasn't openly hostile anymore. I caught her watching me a few times, like she was trying to figure me out, like she was weighing everything she had been told against what she had just seen. Jessica, on the other hand, was desperate. The texts started coming non-stop. Jessica, Bill, we need to talk. Please. Jessica, I know you're angry, but I miss you. We can fix this. Jessica, can we at least talk about the girls? I ignored every message. Then the voicemail started. The first few were soft, pleading. Bill, I hate how things are between us. I still love you. I know I messed up, but can't we just talk? Then came the guilt trips. The girls are so stressed because of this custody battle. Do you really want to do this to them? And finally, the anger. You're so damn stubborn. I made one mistake, and you're throwing everything away. You're turning our daughters against me, Bill. That was Rich. She had turned them against me first. I let every voicemail go unanswered. She wasn't sorry about what she did. She was sorry she got caught. Then, her mother got involved. I was at work when I got a call from my mother-in-law, Nancy. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but at the last second, I picked up. Bill, she started, her voice gentle. Too gentle. I knew where this was going. Nancy, I said flatly. What can I do for you? She sighed. Sweetheart, I know you're hurting, but divorce is a big step. Jessica loves you. She's miserable without you. I clenched my jaw. Maybe she should have thought about that before she cheated. People make mistakes, she said softly. She told me it was just a lapse in judgment. She's willing to go to counseling. I cut her off. Nancy, she didn't make a mistake. She made a choice. Over and over again. She lied, she manipulated, and she thought she'd get away with it. Now she's realizing she lost everything, and she's panicking. Silence. Then, a tired sigh. Bill, I just don't want to see our family torn apart. I almost laughed. Our family? The one Jessica had already set on fire? I appreciate the concern, I said coolly. But this isn't your business. She sighed again, a little sharper this time. You used to be such a kind man, Bill. I don't recognize you anymore. I let out a humorless chuckle. Funny. That's exactly how I feel about your daughter. And I hung up. That night, I was in my office when I heard a soft knock on the door. I looked up. Jessica. She was standing there in an oversized hoodie and leggings, her old at-home clothes. No makeup. Hair tied back. Trying to look like the woman I used to love. Can we talk? She asked softly. I exhaled through my nose. What's left to talk about? She walked in, closing the door behind her. I don't want to fight anymore, Bill. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Then stop fighting me. She swallowed hard. I miss you. I scoffed. No, you miss the life you had. She bit her lip. I made a mistake. I shook my head. You made a choice. Tears welled up in her eyes. Bill, I was lonely. I stared at her, unimpressed. So was I. But I didn't go fuck someone else. She flinched. I still love you. I looked at her for a long moment. Then, I shook my head. I don't love you anymore. She gasped softly, like she wasn't expecting me to actually say it. I'll always care about you, I said. You're the mother of my kids. But love? That's gone. You killed it. A tear slipped down her cheek. I stood up, cutting her off. This conversation is over. She looked at me, truly desperate now. Bill, please. I walked past her and opened the door. Good night, Jessica. For a moment, I thought she'd fight it. Thought she'd beg some more. But instead, she turned and walked out. I closed the door behind her and exhaled. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I just felt done. For the first time in months, I felt free. Jessica had tried everything, guilt, manipulation, even a last-ditch attempt to make me feel sorry for her, but it didn't work. I was done. And as soon as I let go of the past, something unexpected happened. I met Missy. It wasn't planned. I wasn't looking for anything. Hell, after everything I had been through, I wasn't sure I even knew how to be with someone new. But life has a funny way of throwing things at you when you least expect them. I met Missy at a coffee shop. It was a random Saturday morning. I was sitting at my usual table, staring at my phone, half distracted by emails, when I heard a little girl's giggle. I looked up. A little curly-haired blonde was happily spilling sugar packets all over the table while her mother frantically tried to stop her. "Mia, sweetheart, no more sugar. You don't need a caffeine rush at 6 years old," the woman said, exasperated but smiling. I chuckled. She's got the enthusiasm for it, at least. The woman, Missy, looked up at me and laughed. She was beautiful in a completely natural way. No heavy makeup, just soft brown eyes and a warm smile that felt easy. "Single dad?" she asked, nodding at my black coffee and exhausted expression. I smirked. "Divorcing dad?" She raised an eyebrow. "Same here." And just like that, something clicked. Missy and I talked for a while. I told her about Olivia and Hannah, about the divorce, about how complicated everything was. She listened. Really listened. She told me about Mia's dad, how he walked out when Mia was just a baby, how she had been raising her on her own ever since. But she wasn't bitter. She wasn't full of anger, or resentment, or desperation to fix the past. She had already moved past the part where it hurt. I envied that. By the time we finished our coffee, she smiled at me and said, "You ever want to grab coffee again, let me know." I hesitated for a moment. It still felt too soon. I wasn't sure if I was ready for anything. But then I watched her walk away, Mia skipping beside her, and I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. For the first time in a long time, I was living. Things with Missy felt effortless, like breathing fresh air after being trapped in a smoke-filled room for too long. We started meeting for coffee more often. Then lunch. Then walks in the park with Mia. I wasn't rushing anything, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel stuck. I wasn't waiting for another betrayal, another lie. But of course, Jessica couldn't stand that. It happened sooner than I expected. I don't know how she found out, maybe Olivia mentioned it, maybe she saw me somewhere, but one evening, she showed up at my house, livid. "You're dating already?" she spat, standing in my doorway like she had the right to be angry. I leaned against the doorframe, unimpressed. "Nice to see you too, Jessica." Her nostrils flared. "Are you serious? You're seeing someone else while our family is falling apart?" I laughed, actually laughed. "Falling apart? You did that, Jessica. Don't pretend to be shocked now." She crossed her arms. "This isn't fair. You're just doing this to hurt me." I stared at her, barely believing what I was hearing. "You think this is about you?" I shook my head. "I don't spend a single second of my day thinking about how to hurt you, Jessica. You did enough damage on your own." Her face twisted. "So that's it? You're replacing me?" I sighed. "I replaced you the moment you replaced me." That shut her up. She swallowed hard, trying to regain control of the situation. "What about the girls? What about their college plans, their stability?" Before I could answer, Missy stepped onto the porch. She had just arrived, holding Mia's tiny hand, both of them looking completely caught in the middle of this mess. Jessica's eyes locked onto her immediately. "Oh, wow," Jessica sneered, folding her arms. "This is who you're with now?" Missy didn't even flinch. She just looked Jessica dead in the eye and said, "I'm not the one who broke him, sweetheart. That was all you." Jessica's face reddened instantly. I couldn't stop the smirk that tugged at my lips. "She's right," I said, shrugging. "You made this bed, Jessica. And now, you get to lie in it, alone." Her jaw clenched, but she had nothing left to say. She turned and stormed off, getting into her car without another word. Missy looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "So that was her?" I exhaled. "Yeah." She studied me for a moment, then simply said, "I don't like her." I chuckled. "Yeah. Me neither." And as we walked inside together, I realized something. For the first time, Jessica wasn't my problem anymore. That night, after Jessica stormed off, I sat on the couch, watching Mia giggle as she played with her toys. Missy sat beside me, sipping her tea, completely at ease. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about Jessica. I wasn't replaying the betrayal. I wasn't wondering what if. I wasn't stuck in the past. I was here. In this moment. With someone who actually cared about me. Missy must have noticed me staring because she smirked. "What?" I shook my head, smiling. "Nothing. Just. I didn't think I'd ever feel this normal again." She nudged my arm. "You call this normal?" She gestured at Mia, who was currently making a whole mess on the floor with building blocks. I chuckled. "Okay, maybe chaotic normal." She laughed softly, then her expression grew more serious. "Does it still hurt?" I knew what she meant. I thought about it for a second, then nodded. "Yeah. Sometimes. But less and less every day." She set her cup down and leaned into me just a little, just enough for me to feel her warmth. "It's okay if it takes time, you know." I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't pressuring me. She wasn't rushing me. She was just, here. Patient. Understanding. Real. I exhaled. I know. I didn't know where this would go. Maybe it would turn into something big, something real. Maybe it wouldn't. But what I did know was this. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't drowning. I wasn't just surviving. I was living. And no matter what happened next, I was finally at peace.